Hello and welcome to this episode of the P&E podcast. My name's Jack Jacob and I am your host. In this episode, I'm joined by Dilshan Arawwawala, who's the CCIO at Essex NHS Foundation Trust. Dilshan and I start the conversation talking about his early life and the advantages of being the middle child, and how he really felt that getting into grammar school gave him a huge foundation and opportunities to become extremely strong academically. He still continues that studiousness into his adult life and can have as many as 4 books going on at the same time. In addition to being academically strong, Dilshan has always been extremely hardworking, from getting up at 6 a.m. at the age of 11 to doing his paper round, to then doing 120-hour weeks as a medical student. He was really driven to that CCIO role within the trust by wanting to make a real impact on quality of care through digital health. His thoughts on leadership can be summed up nicely in one quote that features in the podcast episode. The most effective leaders are the ones who don't need to show off their shiny badges, but are actually leading by example. Please enjoy this fascinating conversation as we get to know the person behind the job title. Hi everyone, before we get into this conversation, we just want to give a shout out to this episode sponsor, Common Time. Common Time have launched a new brand for the healthcare market which goes live this week called E10. ICOM, a next-generation clinical communications app produced by Common Time, has demonstrated itself as the market-leading application to help replace aging bleep technology currently delivered by pagers, streamlining clinical communications whilst providing a secure and, most importantly, integrated clinical messaging tool that provides real-time instant messaging for all staff. Common Time understands the structure of NHS organisations. As such, ICOM allows its users to interact as individuals, in groups, or directly using their roles and responsibilities within their team. The application hosts impressive features that include automating workflows, escalating or diverting any undelivered or unactioned requests, as well as automating the booking of beds and operating theatres. Common Time are now working in partnership with 8 NHS trusts in helping them to achieve their overarching digital strategy. So cool. So Dilshan, thank you so much for being on. It's a pleasure to speak with you and hopefully get to know you a bit more over the next kind of hour or so.
Thank you for inviting me, Jack. I think these are really interesting times, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Good. So the series of is titled "The Person Behind the Job Title." So all about you. Hopefully nothing that stumps you. So yeah, I think let's start with at the start for you really. So where did you grow up and where did you come from?
Yeah, so I guess my family are originally from Sri Lanka. I was born in Tottenham, North London, and grew up in Ilford, in Essex. And I'm one of 5 brothers, which is, as you can well imagine, a bit of a handful.
Yep. Yeah, the rivalry. I can already see it. The rivalry growing up.
Yeah. So I guess which child do you think I was in that case?
You've said that now. You've got to be the youngest because you said that.
No, I'm the middle child.
You're the middle child. There we go. Well, I had like a 20% chance of getting that right, didn't I?
You did. Yep.
And I definitely didn't get it right. So you was the middle child. So does that mean that you was like the least favorite then, because you weren't the eldest and you weren't the youngest? You was like the one in the middle.
So I guess I had the opportunities to learn from all around me because I was the one with the least focus on me. So I think there's many pluses to being a middle child, is what I'd say.
That was the most political answer I've ever. So I was doing a bit of digging, and first of all, I don't know if you've done this deliberately, but you're hard to dig on because your LinkedIn profile doesn't go to the start. So I had to do even more digging on you. But I saw that you'd gone to a grammar school. So was that through kind of academic achievements growing up and then invited to a grammar school, or what was the situation there?
Yeah, so it was, the 11 plus, and, in those days, didn't have any tuition. It was just go off and do a test, and you kind of just got a letter through saying you've been offered a place, and it was a great experience. It was a long way from where I lived. I had to get normally 3 buses to get there.
Wow.
2 if I was lucky, I got to say, it really did give me the opportunities to become academically far stronger, I believe, than if I'd have gone to a state school.
How was that? Because I assume that you probably was one of the only people from the school that you went to. So it was a primary school, because you're going to grammar schools like from year 7 onwards, isn't it? So was you the only person from your primary school to go to that school?
There was one other boy who went for my school. So they took 120 per year. So so there were 2 of us that kind of made it through.
Yeah.
And so there was an opportunity to kind of meet lots of new people. And I think at that age, you probably don't really value that kind of opportunity. And you kind of just do what you're told in many ways. And you kind of, I mean, we've all been there at 11, and you just kind of just go along and you go to all the classes and so forth. But, it was a school with many opportunities. But what I would say is, I wasn't sporting. I wasn't particularly musical. And I at that point in my life, was loved reading books, loved learning things. And that's where I got the most value out of school.
Makes sense. And were you the only one in your family to go to a grammar school as well, or did any of your brothers go?
No, I was the only one that went to the grammar school. One of my brothers joined in sixth form, because I think there was chances for other people at sixth form to get in. But so I was the only one.
I take back what I said earlier. You were definitely the favourite.
I'm not sure that's the case, but anyway.
So you were academic growing up. Obviously very bright, very intelligent, a big reader. I assume all that kind of stuff stayed with you as well, for your in your adult life as well. I assume you still read and stuff.
I'm definitely. I've normally got kind of 3 or 4 books on the go. Normally 1 or 2 as audiobooks, and another as just simple reading books. And it tends to be a mixture of fiction, non-fiction. And I just think I've always been a bit of a sponge when it comes to information. And as I move on, I feel there's a different field I want to go into. Then I want to know about it and really understand it before I sort of throw myself into it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people tend to be kind of learn on the go, and we all do learn on the go. But I like a nice kind of base to whatever I'm doing in order to kind of launch from. So at the moment, for example, I'm doing it's called the Essential MBA. It's a 10-week online course from London School of Economics, and just felt those kind of business skills will be quite useful with shift partner, but also with my CCIO role. So lots about management accounting and financial accounting at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, awesome. So what did you want to do growing up then? Did you know you wanted to work for the NHS from a young age, or was it something different?
Yeah, I think I was really influenced by my mum. So she was a nurse and worked in the old Mile End Hospital, which I think is now nice big shiny flats or something. And it was a hospital for the elderly. And she used to work incredibly long hours. Night shifts, day shifts, and leave us as kids to kind of get ourselves ready when she needed to. But she absolutely loved her job. She loved helping people, and it was just very much in her nature. And she was the one who said, "Look, you're really bright. Why don't you look to do medicine?" And I thought, I love the sciences. I love learning, and I could see, that I could do loads of that at university. So it was along that vein that I entered medical school.
Makes sense. And then so talk to me about your university days then. So you obviously was at the grammar school. Obviously would have done well in terms of your grading and so on. And did you stay for the sixth form at the grammar school?
I did, yeah. So it was 7 years at that one place, and it was an all boys school, which was quite strict as well. So university was definitely a kind of a whole new world, shall we say, as I think happens to a lot of people. I went to Manchester Uni, and my first experience of it was when I was doing little day trips up to check out universities, and went to go and see Oxford and Cambridge because that's where the school wanted me to apply. and they were just so stiff and rigid kind of organisations. Went to Manchester, the sun was shining, people were sitting on the grass, drinking beer and just having some fun actually, and just enjoying life. And I thought, this is where I want to go. So of all the offers I got, I chose Manchester.
Wow. And so did you get offers at Oxford or Cambridge, or did you not even bother applying?
No, I didn't even apply in the end. But all the other places I received offers from. So I mean, I'm not sure I would have got into Oxford or Cambridge or got an offer for them, but it just didn't. It didn't feel right, and I think for me, it wasn't just about doing a course. There was something more that I wanted from university. And when I visited Manchester, I thought, yes, this is the chance for me to kind of grow, as a person. And I think, in those early years when I was at school, and it was very academically focused, lots of traveling either side to get to and from school, there wasn't those kind of chances to kind of grow as a person.
Yeah, makes sense. So in terms of that as an experience for you, then going from a grammar school with highly intelligent people, probably people that were, and correct me if I'm wrong and making the wrong assumption, but introverts and by the majority, to go into a vibrant city. And I don't get me wrong, you were in Essex. It's not like that's not vibrant enough. But what was that like as an experience for you? You was probably 18, 19 by that point, and moved away, I assume, from the family home, going to a different city, different accents, different cultures, etc. And what was that like as an experience for you?
So I think for the first kind of few weeks, you're absolutely right. A whole new bunch of people. Obviously, there was free money effectively with a grant, 250 miles away from home. Finding out about things like beer and pizza and kebabs and clubs, and it was just one big party to start with. Until you get the phone call from the bank manager saying you need to come in. You're more overdrawn than final year students, and we need to have a chat. And I think you very quickly realise that it's not one big party, and you do have to grow. You have to take some responsibilities, and I think I guess being at home where my mum did everything for us, it just didn't click that all these kind of things were now my responsibility. So I mean, I still obviously continue to have fun, but I think as a person, I did start to grow up very, very quickly.
Yep, makes sense. So you left university, and what did you actually do at university? What was the course?
Yes, I came up with 2 degrees. So obviously, I came up with my medicine degree, but also there was the opportunity to do what we call an intercalated degree, where medics get to count kind of 2 years the first 2 years of their medical degree towards a Bachelor of Science, and I did that in the history of medicine, which was an absolutely fantastic course because it kind of, I think with a lot of things, we're always looking forward and we're always looking at, either where we are now or looking forward, but people rarely look back and actually say, have we done these things before? What can we learn from the past to stop ourselves making those same mistakes or the opportunity to make those same successes again? And so it was a really fascinating course.
Yeah, no, I bet. So talk to me university. So where was your kind of first job and stuff? Or did you go straight into the NHS, or did you have, like a job at a restaurant as a stopgap type thing? What was the kind of work journey like?
Yeah, so from a work point of view, I mean, I've worked from the age of 11. The 6 a.m. paper round to earn a bit of cash, and then worked in the news agents. Then used to work in university in the summers, normally doing kind of admin jobs, and then straight from university joined the NHS. So that was in August 1996, and my first house officer job was in Blackburn, which obviously is on the outskirts of Manchester. Which was it was split across 2 sites, Blackburn Royal Infirmary, and then there was Queen's Park, which was on the top of a hill. And it was an amazing experience. I've got to say, some of the friendliest people that I've ever met, But looking back, I mean, some of the scariest medical experiences, these were the days when you're doing a 120-hour week, and, as the norm, and you were often the one of the most senior medical people on site, out of hours, looking after huge swathes of people with really quite, rudimentary knowledge and skills. But you are thrown in the deep end, and you do learn to swim very, very quickly.
I was going to say, because that seems a lot of responsibility for someone that's not long out of university. So what was there? How did you make such a big jump up in terms of, I suppose, responsibility and pressure ultimately on you? How did that happen so quickly?
Yeah, so you had I mean, each hospital had different kind of setup, and I think and I did have what's called an SHO on call with me, and they're normally about a year more with the years more experience than you, and then a consultant at home. But because of the split site nature of Blackburn, then the more senior doctor, the registrar, was at the other site, which is about kind of 3 or 4 miles down the road. And yeah, you often looked to the kind of senior nurses on site to kind of guide you, and and it still holds true today that if you want to learn how to practice medicine, you need to learn from all around you, and it's not just the doctors. The nurses are the ones who spend far more time with the patient than a doctor does, and that they can really tell you, how a patient is, whether they're improving, what's worrying them. So it really taught me the value of those kind of multidisciplinary conversations, and listening to other people.
Yeah, makes sense. So did you start as a doctor before you went into a specialism?
Yeah, I did. So the structure is you kind of spend 1 year doing 6 months of medicine, 6 months of surgery as a kind of junior doctor. You then get your full registration after that, and then you have to decide where you want to go. And so I chose the route of medicine, and spent a couple of years doing what's called a medical rotation. And I did that at Blackburn again because I really liked the place. And the experience was phenomenal. I was doing things that like senior regis now are only allowed to do, and so it was really good from a learning point of view. But it didn't in a way put me off doing acute internal medicine, because it was just you can never get on top of the job. When you've got 50 plus admissions coming through the door each day, you're always up against it, and it was at that point I kind of realized that I wanted to do something a bit different. I wanted something that was still acute, had lots of hands-on, but had a lot of kind of basic science behind it, and so that kind of drew me into anesthetics and critical, and with want to do intensive care. And so after getting my membership, my MRCP, I said goodbye to a potential future in gastroenterology. That's what I wanted to do, and went and became a anesthetic SHO. I did 2 years on the Manchester rotation, which is a fantastic rotation, going through places like Stepping Hill, Hope Hospital, and loads of other hospitals around there, learning how to become an anaesthetist.
Yep. And what's that like? The first time that you take fully, you're in full control of the situation, and you deliver the medicines that's going to ultimately knock someone out for a period of time. What's the first experience like of that? Can you think back to the first time you've done it and you was ultimately in charge of that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's an incredibly scary experience, because you take someone who's living and they're breathing and they're doing all things for themselves, and you turn them into almost like this fully dependent unit, and I mean it is quite scary. And
Yeah.
and I still, I'm in absolute awe of some of the really senior anaesthetists. I guess I am one of them now, but those days you just look at them thinking they're so relaxed, they're so calm, and they look like they're not really paying attention. But wow, these guys are super focused, and people compare them to airline pilots. And they say the most difficult parts are the takeoff and the landing. Yeah. And they're absolutely right, because that's when you've got to be absolutely honed and you're using all your senses. And it is really a combination of a lot of science, but also an art, because what works for some anaesthetists doesn't work for others. And and luckily, where I trained up in Manchester, I had superb trainers who really kind of held your hand and really got you doing bit by bit, until you were confident in each area. If you were thrown into that without that kind of supervision, you could really cause some damage to people.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting. What I want to stay on this for a second. Talk me through the process, if you can. High level. So someone's got to go down for an urgent operation. What's the process behind it? Do you have to find out weight, height, those kind of things that determine how much drug you administer, how long the operation's going to be? How does it work from that point? I just find it so interesting.
Yeah, I think you kind of apply you look at kind of three main areas. One is patient factors, number two is surgical factors, and number three is anaesthetic factors. So when you kind of first called and they say, look, we need to operate on this person, you'd go and see that patient, and it'd be those three things that are going through your mind. So you'd want to know as a patient, how old are they? How sick are they? Because that gives you those kind of factors. Help you to understand how well they're going to tolerate the anaesthetic and the surgery. So if you've got, for example, quite an elderly patient with lots of comorbidities who's in septic shock, they're going to be a real challenge to actually keep them alive through the whole thing, compared to for example, someone like yourself, young fit guy who's maybe having a toenail removed electively. Your kind of thresholds for for causing harm are much wider.
Sure.
You think about the surgical factors. Exactly, what is the surgeon going to be doing for them? Is he clipping their toenails? Is he basically ripping out all their guts, kind of thing? Because each one is tolerated to clearly in different ways by people. And then the third one, the anaesthetic factors. What are the key things that you have to deliver? Because it may be the right thing to put them into that kind of induced coma, as they call it, into that anaesthetized state. If you do have to do that, well, what are the best drug combinations? Some impact the cardiovascular system more than others. Some you really want the patient to be as wide awake as possible to minimize the risk of them being delirious when they wake up, and you need them to recover quickly. So the combinations you use are different. You may want to use regional techniques and have them fully awake. And so there are a lot of things that you need to understand. But also, everything we do to a patient has the potential to cause harm, as well as good. So if you don't tailor it and you just do things kind of blindly, and you see it sadly, still happening, and it's because people aren't necessarily thinking about everything they're doing.
Yeah.
So it really is quite intense. So I see anaesthetists as almost like swans. So on the surface they're gliding, but their feet are kicking away underneath. They absolutely are. They're some of the brainiest. I wouldn't count myself as one of the brainiest anaesthetists. There are some really brainy anaesthetists, and they all have that ability to process a lot of information very, very quickly.
Yeah. Amazing. It's like I said, it's so interesting because there's such a huge amount of responsibility that bears with that role, and you've got the pressures of making sure that the person is down and gets back up for as long as it needs to be, because you can't have someone wake up mid-surgery, for example, as well, right?
No, yes,
I'm
or
sure
not
there's
wake up at all.
horror stories around that kind of stuff.
There always are, and I think nowadays you look at anesthesia, it's incredibly safe, but it's not risk-free, and it's really, I think, trying to help people understand that every procedure they have done, there are going to be some risks, and it's about how you kind of make that risk benefit argument with them, because ultimately it's their decision as to whether they have the anesthetic for surgery or not. And that's where good communication is critical. You have to be able to speak with the patient, but to really hear them and really hear what their concerns are. And so one of the most critical bits of any anesthetic episode is going to see the patient beforehand and having that conversation to understand who you're dealing with, what you're trying to solve with them, and helping them to understand what they're about to undertake.
Sure. So one note to anyone that's going into surgery: don't be rude to the anaesthetist, because yeah.
Never be rude to anyone is what I say.
Indeed,
But,
indeed, definitely not the anaesthetist. So talk me through your journey then. Let's move on a bit. So you was in Blackpool. Obviously, you're now down in mid Essex, right? So what's the journey in between that?
Yeah, so I did my 2 years SHO rotation, and then was due to apply for a registrar job, and I was originally from down in the southeast, and I actually started going out with a girl from who lived in Surrey and had actually moved up to Manchester to kind of be with me, and we both decided, let's try and get back down to London. Our families were there, friends were there, and so decided to apply for a job on the registrar job on the Imperial rotation, which is obviously West London.
Yep.
And I actually applied to, I phoned up four schools of anaesthesia around London, and I said, look, I'd like to apply. And they said, that's great. And I said, but I want to get the job, and I want to defer it for 6 months. And they said, oh, well, why is that? And I said, well, because I want to go traveling around the world. And they said, so you want to go and experience anaesthesia elsewhere? And I said, no, I want to go and travel and experience different things, grow as a person. I said, look at my CV. I said, I've done far more than most people at this point of my career. I think I've proven myself as being committed and being capable of completing the rotation. And it's actually the Imperial School that said, you know what, that sounds absolutely sensible to us. We'll interview you. If you finish high enough in the rankings in that interview round, then we'll assume that you would have done well for 6 months' time, and we'll give you a deferred placement. And that's how I end up in the Imperial School of Anaesthesia.
That takes some guts.
I think I was just being open and honest with them, really, to say, look, this is who I am. I think I do well with you guys, and this is why you need to give me that opportunity.
How old were you at this point?
25, I think 25, 26. Yeah, so I wasn't that young. I don't think I was necessarily particularly worldly wise either. But one thing that really kind of hit home at that point was I'd been on this kind of educational journey from the age of 11. Straight through school, straight through uni, straight into job, and I thought, I've got another 5 years at least before I can get to a consultant position. And I thought I really need to kind of step off this kind of conveyor belt, which is going along really fast, and just find out a bit more about myself and see a bit more of the world.
Yeah, good for you, because I think a lot of people at that age probably would have just gone, or been too timid to ask that question. I think it was a brave thing to kind of dictate what you ultimately wanted to do. But I think probably that confidence comes with the role that you was in as well, right? Because you like you said, communication skills and so on, and just being open and honest and so on. So I didn't know you'd gone traveling, and it wasn't on my sheet of questions. I have to ask about that then. So where did you go and what did you do for 6 months?
Yeah, so we literally went around the world. So we bought one of these kind of round the world tickets where you kind of fly in at one point and fly at another point on that continent. And
you've got like a certain amount of flights, haven't you? Including
that's right.
Yeah. I've seen them.
Yeah. So we flew into Rio, spent some time in Rio State, and then we went down to Chile, and then up to Peru. And then joined a group of people who did this kind of 1 month trek through Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, doing Machu Picchu, the Inca Trail. And I was actually on the Inca Trail when 9/11 happened.
Oh, wow.
And had no phone or anything. And when we got to the kind of the base camp, and there were kind of a few kind of bars there and telephone, there's always people crying as Americans. And I was thinking, it was quite a hard trek, but it wasn't that hard. It was like 5 days, doing this. And then just walked into this pub and, to have a beer because, hadn't had anything for like 5 days. And just saw these on the TV, like planes flying into buildings. I thought, what movie is this? And it was like, no, this actually happened 2 days ago. and it was like, oh my God. And, we were unaware of this because we were 4,000 or 5,000 meters up with no communication with the world.
Yeah. When that happened, I can imagine your family's concern first and foremost for you traveling, especially, I know you weren't in North America, you was in South America at that point, but still, you're in the west side of the world, right? What was that like for them, dealing with you being abroad and flying regularly when and there was massive scaremongering when that happened. I was only very young when that happened, but I still remember the scaremongering.
Yeah, I mean, they had no contact with us. We didn't have kind of mobile phones in those days, and we would start kind of sending home emails literally, once a month as we were moving from one continent to another, for example. So yeah, we're fine or whatever. And so they had no idea what was going on, and I kind of phoned and said, look, I'm fine, everything's fine. We haven't been in contact because we were just literally in the middle of nowhere. And so I think it was quite scary for them and for our friends as well, because they knew that we were heading into North America. And actually, it was 2 days afterwards that we went into North America via Miami, which is obviously where the kind of terrorists got into the US. So I think it was a scary experience. And I guess that shows how much the world has moved on, right? I mean, now you have a mobile phone in your pocket wherever you are, and you're always contactable. So it was a very different time.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you went into North America and then traveled through the United States, I assume, and into Canada in the end.
No, so we went to Miami, then up to San Francisco, so Los Angeles, then up to San Francisco to see friends, and then we flew from there across to Australia, so to Sydney, and then went trekking up to Cairns. And myself and my wife, we were both really big divers around that time. So each of these places, we were diving, like in South America, we were doing some diving. And then obviously in Australia, you've got to do the Great Barrier Reef. And so we were diving around there. And then from Australia, we flew into Singapore. And then we traveled up from Singapore all the way up through Malaysia and through the islands of Thailand, all the way up into North Thailand. Doing diving all on the way and doing things like the full moon party in Koh Phangan, Bangkok, trekking up in Chiang Mai, all those kind of things. It was just a backpack on your back. And then from there, we went to Sri Lanka, which is obviously where my family are from, and spent a month just backpacking around Sri Lanka, and seeing it from a very, very different perspective. And then back to the UK. Yes.
Had you been to Sri Lanka much growing up?
No, I mean, we weren't from a particularly wealthy family, and we'd done one family trip. Actually, it was the only trip abroad I ever did as a child, was to Sri Lanka, and that was the first and only time that I'd met, one of my grandmothers, and I never got to meet all the others because they all passed away in that time period of me growing up, and so it was a very different country then from what it is now. And in those days, that was in 1983 was the first time I went there. There was like maybe one or two televisions in a village, for example, and you kind of go around to that person's house to watch it. And I think it was the royal wedding, actually, that I think I remember seeing, if I remember rightly, when I was over. Yeah,
the things you remember, eh?
I know, and it's crazy. Yes, so it was it was a side that I really wanted to spend some time in that country, because that's where obviously my parents are from, and that's where I knew half of me was all of me was from. I mean, in terms of my roots, and I thought it was really important I try and get to know parts of my family a bit better. And over the ensuing years, I've been back, loads of times, either on my own or with my own family, trying to keep those links up and maintain those connections, because if I don't, then it's even less likely with my children for that to happen.
Of course. You seem very self-aware. I wrote on my notes, like, logical, and bring that up again. You talked about earlier about, when you go into something, you really want to learn about stuff, and you really seem to know how you work and know what you want to do. Even the example of you wanting to travel and stuff like that before starting. Where does that come from, do you think? Because again, going back to what you just said about wanting to know your roots and that being important to you and stuff like that, comes from you knowing what you want. So where does that self-awareness come from, do you think?
Oh, that's a really good question, actually. um, I'm not really sure, and I think maybe
Do you agree with me though?
yeah, no, I do, and I think it maybe comes from a desire to succeed and to do well. I think I'm always looking to continually improve myself, and I'm always reflecting on what I've done, and I do that pretty much every day. I just whether it be in bed or first thing in the morning, I'm just thinking about what I did the day before. I'm thinking, what could I have done better? How could I have changed it? And think about what's coming on the day and thinking, how am I going to frame myself? What's missing? Are there any pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that I need to find? Anyone I need to speak to? Any bit of knowledge I need to add to the equation? So it's just the way I think my brain's
Yeah.
has worked.
It's rare. It's really rare to be that self-aware, and that it's so easy. 90% of the population drift, right? Drift through their life, and there's no goals. Um, there's no kind of real purpose as to what they're doing or why they're doing it, and so on. And for you to be that reflective, even, and you have to be conscious with that, don't you? That's something that doesn't really come unconsciously. You don't just think, oh, what did I do yesterday? How can I be better today? So is there a certain routine that you stick to? Is there certain living principles that you have?
I think one thing that helps me is I'm a runner, and an outdoor cyclist, and those are time periods where I'm on my own, and I can really get kind of lost in my own thoughts and really think things through. And I think that's where I get that time to reflect. I tend to run a very, very busy week, and normally I'm kind of up at 6, and I'm not normally in bed till about at least 11 at night. And the rest of my family doesn't get up till about 8, 9, and so I normally have a couple of hours in the morning, make a coffee, and I can just sit down and have a little think about things. And when I'm running, I can do the same thing. And yeah, I think it's just something I've always done. And when you mention the word purpose, I'm guessing if my kids were on this call right now, they'd be rolling their eyes going, oh my God, he sounds just like Dad. Because I'm always saying, you've got to have a sense of purpose, and it doesn't have to be really rigid, but you've got to have some kind of path, because as you say, otherwise you drift, and you can be drifting from side to side. If it's too rigid, then maybe it takes a little bit of fun out of life. But I think, for me, it's always been about having different goals at different points in my life, and also not being selfish about it, having goals that actually fit in with the people around me, and specifically, I think my wife and my kids. So doing all my exams before my kids were born, that was a real challenge. I mean, my wife was like 7 months pregnant when I was doing my final FRCA, thinking I've got to pass this now, because if I don't get it, I'm gonna have a kid there, and it's a very different equation then. We didn't go. I had a placement in Australia for a year to go and work in Royal North Shore doing intensive care. I didn't take it because we then had a young child, and it didn't seem the right thing to do. And then just making sure that I've been around for the family, over the last kind of 5 to 10 years, saying, I'd love to set up my own business and do different things, but now's not the right time, to do it. As in those, but now my kids are 16 and 12, and now is the right time to start doing different things.
You don't look old enough to have a 16-year-old, Dilshan.
Do I not? Thank you very much.
You don't.
I take that as a compliment.
Yeah, you should. You should. Well,
yeah.
So you got 2 children.
I do, yes. 2 boys.
Boys, girls, two boys.
Yeah.
Your family must be bursting with boys. What about your brothers? What did they have?
Yeah. So let me think. So my oldest brother has 1 boy. My second eldest guy, I need to think about this. Yeah, he is a boy. And then actually my younger brother has 1 boy, 1 girl. My youngest brother has 1 girl. But we've always said my youngest brher is adopted.
8, 9 boys. Say that again. Sorry.
We've always said my youngest brother is adopted, so that's why we had a girl. So, so it's a family joke. You know what kids are like? Yeah, they pick on each other and say horrible things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there's something in our genes which definitely makes us more predisposed to have boys, for sure.
Yeah. I've got 3 girls, so we'll have to have a private conversation after, and you'll have to let me know how it works.
I'm not drawing you any pictures, Jack.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll communicate. We'll have a chat.
Absolutely.
There we go. So we got to your to the point where about 25, 26, and you'd then gone off traveling. So fast forward to now, really. So you become CCIO for the trust about 3-4 years ago, wasn't it? 2016.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just over 3 years ago, and
yeah.
so I guess the question, why did I go for that position? And I think when I became a consultant, I was really keen on things like R&D and on quality improvement. So I took on kind of departmental audit roles and then trust-wide audit roles, looking to kind of continually improve services.
Yep.
I was heavily involved in research and getting lots of research projects through and intensive care unit.
Mhm.
And I kind of guess what I noticed was that the impacts I were having were small, but they were quite difficult to sustain. And I think this is when I think digital was really kind of starting to show its head in healthcare. And I thought, this is potentially a really good opportunity to really start improving things. And as you know, I'm an improvement kind of guy, and I thought that I could really have a big impact here. Really help to change things. And so I applied for the job, and I got it, which is
Had you
great.
heard? Had you heard of the role before, a CCIO?
No, I hadn't actually, and so I'm glad they didn't ask me any technical questions or digital questions on the interview because I would have failed. And so
You'd have read a book before, definitely, about it.
yeah, well, so you're absolutely right, Jessica. Because what happened is when I started in the role, it became, within about 6 months, I was thinking, what, I do not know what I need to know for this job, and I thought, this is not a good position to be in, and this is a position which has a lot of responsibility, a lot of risk with it as well, not just individually, but actually to my colleagues from the organisation, and I need to do something about this. I need to go and read a book, as you said, or find a way of improving myself. And it was lucky that the NHS Digital Academy kind of started, advertising at that point, and it was, someone in the organisation said, "Look, have you seen this?" And I went, "Oh, this looks perfect." And so, I literally, it was the night before the deadline. I remember sitting on my bed, literally just typing on my computer the application form to send in, thinking, I haven't got a hope in hell. I've literally just knocked this out in 5 minutes. Because I think I think you see this in the public sector a lot. People taking on positions of responsibility without necessarily having the knowledge and the skills, and also I guess the behaviours to actually do them well. And I didn't want to become one of those people. And I
Sure.
thought,
So you don't agree with the Richard Branson quote then?
which is that one?
If you're given an opportunity to do something you don't know how to do, take it and then learn after, or words to that effect.
So I think if the impact is just on you, then fine, you can get away with that. But I think in a profession like healthcare and
Of course.
looking after people, I don't think you can do that. I mean, sure, everyone learns on the job, and just doing a course, it is, as I said before, it's just the base to which you launch from. But if you start with zero knowledge, you will make probably far more mistakes on that basis, and it's just not an ethos that I sign up to.
Sure. But again, I think that comes down to your logical approach to stuff, right? And probably doesn't sit well with you. It's just probably not in your kind of ether. So you joined the Digital Academy, and you was then kind of mentored. The group was mentored by Rachel Dunscombe and others, but obviously with Rachel being the chief executive of that. So how was that then as an experience? How did that improve you? And would you say that was a bit of a saving grace for you in that role?
Without a doubt. I mean, I cannot sing the praises of the NHS Digital Academy high enough. I do set a very high bar. And I'm very quick to find fault in things. But for their first pass, it was almost spot on in terms of the content and their approach to teaching. A bunch of mid-40s individuals, who've all done loads of degrees between them, all super bright, who all kind of think they know best sometimes, and it was brilliant. I've got to say, it was absolutely brilliant. And so And I think bringing together the NHS with Imperial, with Harvard, and Edinburgh University, because they're all the kind of people that put the course together, was absolutely inspired, because I think it brought all the right skills together. And I think, not only was it all the knowledge and skills that I learned, which I'm still applying day in, day out, but I think it was that the networking and the contacts that I've made through it, have been transformational for me as a person.
Yeah, of course. Because Rachel was one of the first, because she was at Bolton when she brought on a number of CCIOs. Philippa Winter was one of them. That was 2011, 12, I think, when Rachel done that at Bolton, which is like, probably maybe the first in the NHS to do so. I think I was speaking to James Rawlingson at Rotherham, who was telling about his CCIO, Richard Slater. Again, they were very early on in that as well. But it must have been amazing to be mentored or to be part of a group mentored by ultimately the person that really made the CCIO a thing in the NHS.
Without doubt, I mean, Rachel was an incredibly inspirational person. Just what she's achieved is just phenomenal. But her humility, she's the kind of person who will happily come over and will say, "Can I hug you?" And there are no airs and graces with her. We all know what she's achieved, but when you look at her and you talk to her, none of that comes across, because she would always talk to you as a person. And I think those for me are the most effective leaders out there. The ones who don't need to show off their shiny badges, but the ones who are literally leading by example. I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah. So Rachel was going to speak at my event in March, that unfortunately got cancelled because of COVID and the situation. So to be fair, I haven't had that many interactions with her, but completely get what you say. When she answers the phone, it's like, "Oh, hi, Jack, how you?" Really bubbly, really nice. And you speak to other people, and I think actually part of the reason why I was doing this podcast series, the person behind the job title series, was to debunk that myth that people with senior job titles are more difficult to speak to, and that actually it's just a human at the end of or behind a title. And she exemplifies that. Really does. Really nice, bubbly. Always got, every time I've spoken to her, it's always been very, very pleasant. So, actually, I need to get her on for a podcast. We have spoke about it, and I need to get her on. So, there we go. That is
definitely. I would absolutely be, signing up to listen to that podcast, because I don't know much about her past, and I'm guessing it's a phenomenal experience, journey that she's been on.
Yeah.
To get to that point. I mean, what is clear when you talk to Rachel is that she absolutely loves the NHS. And she loves what it stands for. She loves what it's about, for her family, her colleagues, and she's really brought into it and sees the value of training people properly. I think recognizing that there are a lot of people out there who are interested in, but have different interests. And when you look in that room, this first 100 from cohort 1, and as you got to know them, everyone had an interest in kind of technology in a way, in healthcare, but they're all coming from very different angles potentially. There were some who liked the tech, and fiddling with code. There were others who loved data. There were some, like myself, who were all around kind of quality improvement, And I think what she makes you all realize is all those skills are important, but if you try and apply just one, you're not going to solve it. You need to have that kind of end-to-end journey approach to it, and that real empathetic, end user approach. Because when you're in management within the hospitals, I think sometimes people forget what our mandate is. It is to care for patients, but actually what it really is to give frontline staff the tools to be able to look after the patients.
Yeah,
that's what they're there for.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about leadership. What does leadership mean to you? Good leadership, hopefully.
Yeah. That's a really well. That's a tough question. I should have thought this beforehand, shouldn't I? Well, what is leadership to me? So I guess when I look at the people who I see have been good leaders, that guess what does good mean? And for me, it's about being effective. So just pointing in a direction and saying, "Everyone follow me." It is not the sign of good leader. For me, good leaders are those who have a kind of understanding of roughly where they want to go, but actually will listen to people who know that space a lot better. Don't try and say, I'm the best at all of this, but understand what their real skill is bringing the right people together, and getting them to talk with each other, everyone to become enthusiastic and all pointing in the same direction. That's what a good leader is. And so it's around a lot of those softer skills, which sadly a lot of schools don't teach or focus on. So that for me is the sign of good leading. So and that's where I would like to be.
No, good answer. Do you, with your role now as a CCIO, is that full time, or are you still doing your consultant role as well?
Yeah, I still do my consultant role. So in anaesthetics intensive care,
Yeah.
I have 1 day a week as CCIO, which is nowhere near enough. And I think our organisation is slowly starting to realise that there is a need far more clinical informatics time, and not just necessarily at a CCIO level, but as a thread throughout the organisation. I think you see in some organisations, digital being very separate from organizational, in terms of organizational strategy or operational strategy, and it cannot be. Digital should be the kind of thread running through that, and being able to enable what you want to do from a strategic and operational perspective.
Tech being the enabler, right? Tech being the enabler for improved services, for better productivity, to being safer. Or look at all of the CQC standards. You could apply tech to all of those. How can tech enable us to become more led, or better led, or well led rather? I got there eventually. More caring, etc., etc. Do you know what I mean? And it's about how,
I can agree. When you look at the kind of, I think the kind of 3 words which kind of really resonated with me for the NHS Academy were from Lord Darcy's paper, which is digital transformation in healthcare. It's about delivering safer, more effective, more efficient care. It's not about digitizing for the sake of digitizing. It's about using that to deliver those 3 things. That's the only way we're going to be able to deliver good healthcare. If you want to get buy-in from people on the shop floor, you have to do those 3 things. And for them, the most important thing are the first 2: safe and effective. Efficient. Of course, everyone wants to do things efficiently, but for people on the front line, why they want
emotional trigger, right?
No, it's not. Being able to kind of say we did it at 20%, less on revenue. I mean, that's great, but it's not the reason why doctors and nurses went into their professions, right? And so if you put in things which take twice as long, or run the risk of wrong results going to the wrong people, you're doing all the wrong things. And I think we sometimes forget those very simple messages about what digital transformation is all about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what's next then for you? So, is it more around that kind of digital transformation role, and you kind of taking more of spending more time as perhaps being a CCIO rather than a consultant in intensive care and so on?
Yeah, I think so one thing that's always been really important to me is to make sure I keep a foot on the shop floor, because and I see it with other senior leaders, is as soon as they leave clinical practice, it's almost like it's frozen in time for them, and they base all their decisions on how what their perceptions were of healthcare delivery. So one, for credibility, but number two, to make sure that you understand how the shop floor is evolving, so you can really help. And if you haven't got an ear on the real shop floor, you're hearing what people want you to hear in many ways. Yeah. So you've got to be there. You've got to be visible. It's like the old CEOs of the big kind of FTSE companies who say, they used to wander around the shop floor, or make sure all their managers actually worked in each department. And I think it's absolutely true. If you don't understand the business that you're trying to manage or lead, how can you? In many ways, So I think maybe I'd like to go into kind of strategy, and maybe more senior leadership position. I think would be great. I think that's, for me, is what I'm doing all these things now to try and get that base knowledge that I was going about, which is why I'm doing this kind of an MBA course at the moment as well. And I've done digital clinical safety courses, which NHS Digital run. Being an entrepreneur, I think is really important, because you need to understand that side of things, see it from the supplier's perspective, understand what their pressures are, what their targets are, how to engage with them, and then I'll have the knowledge, the skills, the language to be able to cross all those different boundaries, and to really kind of help to interpret and support conversations. When a supplier says, yes, well, we can kind of do that, it means that, well, he doesn't have the product as yet, but he could do, or we need staff say, this is important for us, and saying why it's important, and so that for me is important. The next couple of years is to develop Shift Partner. To develop
talk to me about Shift Partner, because so what is it? So you developed it. You're the co-founder. You don't really
Yes, I'm one of the co-founders. The two other guys have owned their software company for years, and they have been in the cloud space for a long time. So they're very long in the tooth on that. And the core product, so we have two products now, was all around additional shifts at work. So I remember as a consultant, coming in early one morning, and the lead nurse for the night shift for IT was literally in tears. And I said to her, look, what's wrong? And she said, I started the night -1, and I ended up -2. And I went, I don't know what that means. Can you explain? And she went, well, I was down one member of staff. They sent me an agency person, and they could do nothing. They had none of the access to the computers. They had none of the prescribing skills that I needed. And so I had to have one member of staff chaperoning her. So I went from -1 to -2. Yeah. And they had a hideous night, and everyone was just literally run ragged because of that. And so actually getting someone in made things worse rather than better. And I was saying, well, surely, they must check, what these people have, the skills and stuff. And they went, no, they just see that we need a nurse of this banding, and they give us a nurse that banding. And I was thinking, well, that's just crazy. And so that's where the kind of idea came from, was actually, what, there's a lot of need for flexibility within healthcare, and not just within acute trust, but across the sectors. And a lot of the kind of products, the digital solutions out there, are very operational, and it's about, here's a job for a band 7 nurse, and whoever applies for it, yes, you can have it, without any contextualization. And it doesn't do anyone any favors. It doesn't help that nurse, because she may be thrown into an environment she doesn't understand. It doesn't help that environment she's going into, where they need someone who can actually be part of that team, And so this actually formed the basis of my NHS Digital Academy transformation project for the postgraduate diploma, but also my masters, which I've just finished. And so the topic was what motivates nurses to do bank shifts, and really understanding what the challenges are. And if you look in my organisation, for example, 50% of nurses don't do any additional bank shifts. And those that do, 90% will only work in their own clinical area. That tells you you've got a problem if you want a flexible workforce. Yeah. And so it was understanding, what were the kind of factors behind there, and actually, could we actually build something that can, make a difference And so I kind of took my findings to the trust, and so I started the actual the project before the Digital Academy, and it was initially a kind of operational tool, and we got a pilot up and running, and it was looking to be really successful. But we noticed dips in data, like people weren't applying for shifts. I mean, didn't understand why that was. But then doing the Digital Academy and using Shift Partner as my kind of project all the way through, I start to understand, actually, I know now how to really dig into this and try and really investigate why this is happening and how to make it better. So, I got all my research together, and I said, NHSI had this capital bid, and I said to the trust, look, I think we should apply for this because we've got a product. It's basic at the moment, but my research shows we need to develop it in this direction. They went, that looks great. And so we put the application together, we took it to NHSI, and they went, this is amazing. And they went, here you go, a load of money. And so we're now developing the product. We're about to kind of expand it across the 3 organizations, and then building the new features over the next kind of 6 to 12 months, all based on evidence. Not just me and my own ideas, as to what I think, but actually by understanding what the micro problems are, within that, within the workforce. And people have talked about this for years, about trying to understand it, and I think we can understand. I don't think we can fully solve it. There's definitely elements of it that we can solve with digital as the enabler.
Yeah.
So that's the main product. So there's a second product actually, which all came out of COVID. So our deputy CEO said, look, Dilshan, we need a product literally next week to help us do swab testing locally, because we don't have a government test site near us. Can you help us? Because your kind of app does like bookings and stuff. We said, okay, sort of, yeah. And so we literally built a whole new platform in like 5 days. And we literally had people testing it on the Wednesday night, live on the Thursday, having spent the whole Easter weekend building this. And we set up the 3 mobile test sites in the Mid and South Essex region. So we provide the tech and the platform to do it, so people can actually sign up. They can book a test appointment, and then go and get the test done, and then get the results back to them, and have their own kind of patient portal. And so it was applying all the skills that I learned from the NHS Digital Academy, to this product. And then he said, well, we'd love to do it now for antibody testing. So we went, okay, so we built a whole new pathway again, within the same platform in about 3 or 4 days. And I think as of last week, we've done about 30,000 tests on the platform. Another region, West Essex, heard about it and said, look, we'd love to use it as well. So we went live with them a couple of weeks ago, and it's working well there and stuff, And so, so that's a kind of a second one. I mean, and that was all being done, we literally just covered the kind of dev costs, because it's for COVID. It's helping out locally, and so it's been a really, really good project, because you really do learn how to build from scratch really quickly, and and having all those skills in the Digital Academy, from the digital clinical safety, etc., I was thinking, wow, if I tried to do this without this kind of stuff, well, one, I want me to do it because I don't have all the skills, but I was able to, we put all the right people together with all the right skills, and to deliver it. And I actually presented it on the first NHS Digital Academy webinar about 2 or 3 weeks ago, saying, applying NHS Digital Academy in real world, to the real world. And so it's a great kind of side story from the main Shift Partner story.
Awesome. Well, all through that, I realised why you have to wake up at 6 and go to bed at 11, because I mean, how you cram all this stuff into your day is just crazy. Your time management must be just unbelievable.
I think if you ask my wife, she's probably the most frustrated person around, because she says, like, you can't sit still for 2 seconds. I can't watch more than one episode of anything in a go, because I just need to go and do something else. I think I just like to keep busy. I like to kind of do new things and see if I can be successful at it and stuff. And it does bring me kind of great joy, I've got to say.
I can imagine. It's like the purpose thing you said, right? And it's you'll never get to the end. You'll never get to
That's absolutely right.
The destination, but every step you get, you find a little bit more motivation to make another step forward and progressing. So
I think, Jack, I think in this period of time, you've got to know me quite well, actually, because if people say to me, when do you want to retire, the answer is I won't. Yeah, I just never will, because it's just not.
You'll end up getting an allotment when you're about 70, 80, won't you? And that'll be like, you'll go to work every day on the allotment or something like that, won't you?
Well, I've already done that whole growing vegetables. I did that years ago. That's already ticked off on my bucket list. I've run marathons. I've done huge cycle rides. You name it. I've done it.
Well, I'm going to ask about that. So I want to know from a personal perspective. What do you do to have fun and relax, and what's enjoyable to you, and your family as well, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think I've always I love spending time with my family. I think there are a lot of people out there who've been very, very successful, and they all say the same thing. They say, if I could go back, turn the clock back, I would spend more time with my family. And it's the one thing in life that we cannot control is time, and that time is quite critical, because the changes that your family are going through are huge. I just look back at the photos of my 16-year-old in his nappies and stuff, think, wow, has time flown? But I know that I have spent a huge amount of time, watching him grow up, helping him to grow up, and so that's always been really, really important to me, and always will be, spending time with the family. I love to travel. We've traveled all around the world, normally we're going away kind of 3 to 4 times a year, and I see it as a great investment. One for me, but also for the kids, to see what's out there in the world, and I think you can get very blinkered by just your own environment. Learning new skills. So I go skiing once or twice a year. I learned late in life, so I'm not as good as my kids, who are both annoyingly fantastic skiers. But I love being outdoors. Running, cycling. I loved scuba diving before the kids came along. All this kind of things. I absolutely love. And before COVID happened, meeting up with friends, going out to new restaurants, taking the family out. We have like different kind of restaurant challenges. Like a couple of years ago, it was about trying to find the best mince pie. Having a mince pie tasting competition, or finding the best burger in London. Those are the kind of things. Little kind of projects, and to kind of explore new things. I'm an explorer, I guess. Is at my heart.
You're inspiring. Do you know that? You are, genuinely. You've inspired me. You said a few things there that resonate. I need to spend more time with my children, and I need to do more stuff with them. And you seem to have real clarity on life. And you seem very, very, you know what you want, and you do it, and it's brilliant. It's inspiring. It really is.
No, thanks. I think, just thinking about it, I think when you work in intensive care, you do see a lot of young people coming in who unfortunately, don't come out of intensive care. And it does make you realize that, you do have one life, and you've got to make the most of it. And, unfortunately, both my parents died when I was young. I think those kind of things really do kind of hit home and make you realize, you do have very limited time, and you've got to try and make the most of it, and that often means compromises. I don't know anyone who's done everything and said, I regret nothing. And we all have choices, and there's people out there who say that they don't have choices. I think if there's no opportunities, that's something to complain about. But if the opportunities are there, it is up to you to kind of grab those opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been a pleasure. It really has been. It's been really good. I've really, really enjoyed this one. So thank you ever so much. It's been a pleasure to get to know the person behind the job title.
And Jack, thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I hope we get the chance to meet up in person over a beer.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for listening to that episode of the P&E podcast. If you like what you heard, please make sure that you share this episode via your social media channels, as it really does help us to gain traction in promoting this podcast series. Please make sure that you also subscribe to the channel that you're listening via, as you'll then get notifications as soon as we release our next podcast episode. Thank you.